The book of Judges closes with 2 episodes that seem to depart dramatically from the pattern that we've gotten so used to in this narrative. The most obvious difference between these stories and the preceding episodes is that they have no judges. In a way, that means they sort of mirror the opening chapter, which also had no judges. But there are some other similarities to the opening chapter as well. The first chapter features tribal movements and the failures of the various tribes to conquer their allotments. The last episodes sort of return to those themes once again. We'll observe other similarities between these last chapters and the opening chapter as we go along. But in other ways, the final chapters are totally unlike anything else in the book. They clearly form a unit, sharing some features and images. Both stories are centered on the hill country of Ephraim. Both begin with a scene of domestic discord, but the action escalates until it involves whole tribes. Each story features a Levite. One Levite from the town of Bethlehem, another on his way to the town of Bethlehem. But the feature that most defines these 2 chapters as a unit is an obvious, intentional one. The entire section is punctuated, beginning, middle, and end, with the statement, "There was no king in Israel." It's a rather obvious way of saying, this is what happens when leadership is absent without leave. So the first story begins in a home in the hill country of Ephraim, with a moment of tender confession. A man named Micah says to his mother, "Oh, Mom, you know that silver that was stolen from you? You know, the silver where you cursed the person who stole it? Well, I've got it. Here it is." And his mother obligingly lifts the curse by saying, "Blessed be my child by the Lord." So everything's all better now, right? Micah's mama decides to celebrate by dedicating some of the silver to a good cause, making a nice little shrine for their own backyard. Micah creates some idols and an ephod, like the one that Gideon had made, and he consecrates one of his own sons to serve as the priest. What a way to become the envy of your friends! And what an irony that this man whose name means "who is like Yahweh" or Yahweh the Incomparable has tried to make some images to capture God's glory. Our editor inserts here the understated comment, "There was no king in Israel in those days. Everyone did whatever he thought was right." So the young Levite comes by and enters into the picture. He has set out from Bethlehem, and he's eager to make a name for himself. Micah takes the traveler in, like any good person would have done in those days, due to the laws of hospitality. But when he learns that the man is a Levite, he knows that good fortune has smiled on him. He shows him the idols and the shrine, and he asks the Levite if he'd be willing to serve as his priest. They negotiate the price, and the Levite eagerly agrees. Now, Micah says, "I know the Lord will bless me, because I have a real Levite as a priest." But Micah's hospitality is going to get him into trouble. There are a group of spies from the tribe of Dan passing through the hill country of Ephraim, looking for a homeland for their tribe, because they weren't able to conquer the land that God had allotted to them in the first place. So, as the spies come near Micah's house, he invites them to come inside and sit a spell. Of course, he has to show them his fine idols and his ephod and his priest, and the Danites are suitably impressed. Soon the Danites continue on their journey, and they discover the city of Laish, a Phoenician town, quiet and secure, not really fortified against an invasion because they rely on trade and diplomacy to garner the goodwill of their neighbors. The Danite spies think it's a perfect setup. This is a people they're sure to be able to conquer. So they go back down south to get the rest of their tribe. Now the whole tribe of Dan is passing through the hill country of Ephraim, and once again they come to Micah's house. The spies say, "Hey, fellow Danites, do you know that at this house there are some fine idols and an ephod and a priest? So think now, what is the right thing to do in this situation?" Since they know they have Micah outnumbered, the Danites are pretty sure they'll be able to conquer his household. So they break in, they take his idols, they take his ephod, they even invite the priest to come along, to become a priest for the whole tribe of Dan. He was a little reluctant at first, but then he was just totally blown away by their song and dance number. But when Micah wakes and discovers the abduction, he isn't nearly so happy. He and his servants catch up with the Danites and they confront them, saying, "You've taken my gods that I made and my priest!" But the Danites warn him, "Don't let your voice be heard among us, or some desperate men might fall upon you, and they would kill you and your whole household." Well, that's enough of a threat to make Micah head back home empty-handed. The Danites, meanwhile, they head on up to Laish. They massacre the people there, who of course are living peacefully and securely, and then they set up Micah's images in their very own tribal tabernacle. And there it remained, says our editor, until the captivity of the land. Once again, in his understated fashion, our editor makes a theological comment. The departure of the Danites from the Orthodox faith leads to their exile. The next story similarly starts out with a bit of domestic discord. This time, it's a Levite who's been having an argument with his concubine, and she has run home to her parents. Now, when some people think of concubines, they think of a slave, but that's not really the case. Concubines were second-class wives, women who came into the marriage without family status or without dowry, and who typically had few legal rights in matters of divorce or inheritance. This concubine seems to have had an argument with her husband. Now, the Hebrew text says that she had been unfaithful to him, but most scholars believe that that's probably a scribal error. Rather, it seems that she was angry with him, and so she had run home to mother and father. After a while, the Levite decided he wanted his wife back again, much to the relief of the Levite's father-in-law. So the Levite and his servant go down to Bethlehem to retrieve the concubine. And then the misadventure begins, starting with a father-in-law who can't seem to say goodbye. He is sort of the anti-JL, striving to extend hospitality to its limits, but inadvertently causing a great tragedy. When the Levite and the concubine and the servant start back home again, it's getting late. They need to stop somewhere for the night. They pass by the city of Jebus. At that time, it was a non-Israelite city. Later, it'll be conquered by King David and made into his capital, Jerusalem. The servant suggests that they stop there for the evening. But the Levite says, no, it's a violation of his principles to lodge in a city of non-Israelites. So they go on to Gibeah, territory of Benjamin. The Levite's father-in-law had gone overboard on hospitality. The men of Gibeah, however, proved to be just the opposite. Nobody invites the party inside for the night. They're about to set up camp in the city square when a man from Ephraim, who's temporarily living in Gibeah, sees them and invites them inside. They're all enjoying some conversation together when, in the middle of the night, there comes a pounding at the door. In a scene reminiscent of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, there's a gang of ruffians outside demanding that the men who are visiting be sent outside so that they can assault them. Now, let's make something clear here. These men are not sex-starved homosexuals. Homosexual rape in the ancient world was primarily a matter of humiliation, not sexual gratification. They wanted to exert their power over these visitors, not express their appreciation for their manly physiques. When the owner of the house offers his daughters, the men aren't pacified. It's not the same thing to take the daughters of a resident as it is to humiliate a visitor from another tribe. The Levite's concubine is something of a consolation prize for these men. Raping her was a way of showing their mastery over the visitors and the tribe they represent. And obviously it represents utter contempt for the laws of hospitality as well as the laws of the Lord. Now, the Levite certainly looks less than heroic in this whole affair. In order to spare himself, he sacrifices his concubine. In the morning, after she has been assaulted all night, we have a pitiful scene. He opens the door and she is lying there clinging to the threshold of the house. "Get up," he says, and she doesn't answer. So he lifts her body and places it upon his donkey, and he and his servant set off for home. And when he gets there, he takes the body and he cuts her into 12 pieces and sends one piece to each tribe of Israel. What is he thinking? Apparently, this procedure is a perverse reflection of the method used to summon the tribes of Israel to a meeting. In 1 Samuel 11, Saul sends pieces of oxen to the 12 tribes to summon them to fight against the Ammonites. It probably made a deeper impression than the singing telegram. So the tribes assembled to decide the fate of Gibeah, but no representatives from Benjamin turn out. When the other tribes demand that the Benjaminites surrender the men who committed the crime, Benjamin refuses. So Israel decides to go to war against the tribe of Benjamin. They muster hundreds of thousands of men from all of the other tribes. Benjamin has 26,000 soldiers, including 700 left-handed stonecasters, reminiscent of another left-handed hero from the tribe of Benjamin named Ehud. In a bizarre parody of Judges chapter 1, the Israelites inquire of the Lord to see who's going to begin the campaign against their fellow Israelites. And God answers just as he had in Judges chapter 1. Judah is to go up first. But unlike the case in the first campaign, God seems reluctant to bless this venture. The Benjaminites win a great victory over the men of Judah on the first day. The second day of the battle also goes to the Benjaminites. But on the third day, the Israelites set up an ambush for Benjamin. The army of Benjamin is routed, and the Israelites go through and begin to conquer all the cities of the Benjaminites, killing man, woman, child, even animals. When their bloodlust is sated, Israel realizes what they have done. Almost an entire tribe of Israel has been destroyed. Only a few hundred men, the prisoners of war, remain. The people who had fought against Benjamin had sworn a vow not to allow their daughters to marry any of the Benjaminites, reminiscent of that rash vow that Jephthah had made that had cost him the life of his daughter. Now it seemed like a vow could lead to the loss of an entire tribe. So the Israelites consulted together on how to find wives for the remaining men of Benjamin. They discovered that the city of Jabesh-Gilead hadn't turned out to join the war against Benjamin. So they killed all the men of the city and all the women who weren't virgins, and they gave the remaining women to the men of Benjamin to be their wives. But that still wasn't enough. They still needed more women. So the Israelites instructed the Benjaminite men to lay in wait outside the city of Shiloh during the time of the yearly festival when the young virgin women would go out into the field to dance. When the women came out, the men of Benjamin fell upon them and carried off for themselves wives. And our editor wraps up the whole affair by reminding us that in those days there was no king in Israel, so everyone did whatever they felt was right. This last episode in Judges certainly demonstrates a failure of human leadership in Israel, but it seems to serve another purpose as well. Several elements of this story foreshadow the next significant event which occurs in the Deuteronomistic history. A few chapters later, there's going to be a Benjaminite from the city of Gibeah who will enter a town of Shiloh, seeking not a wife but lost donkeys. There he is going to be anointed king of Israel. King Saul will himself note that his tribe is the smallest of all Israel, due no doubt to the fact that it was nearly exterminated. Saul's first act as king will be to cut up oxen and to send the pieces out to the 12 tribes, mustering them to rescue a city of Israel from foreign oppressors. The city that Saul rescues is none other than Jabesh Gilead, the very same city that the Israelites had slaughtered to obtain wives for the Benjaminites. But that's not the end of the connections here. Later in Saul's career, a man from Bethlehem will bring an end to his dynasty. That man, King David, will come from the tribe of Judah, the same tribe that was sent out to do battle against the tribe of Benjamin. And King David will make Jebus, the city snubbed by the Levite, the capital of his empire. What does all this mean? Perhaps the Deuteronomist has drawn out these allusions to remind the readers of the status of Benjamin in Saul's time. It was a tribe that had been nearly destroyed because of its abominable wickedness. Or perhaps something more is intended. Perhaps our editor wants us to see that the injustices of the last episodes of Judges are being redressed. This time when the tribes assembled, Benjamin was not absent. A man of Gibeah is at the head of the assembly. This time Jabesh Gilead will not be slaughtered to provide wives for Benjamin. It will be rescued by a Benjaminite. This time Shiloh will not lose its daughters. Rather, it will be honored with the presence of a king.